All right, thanks, Wayne. All right, thank you for joining the CPE work session today. While this meeting is not a formal one with action to be taken, it's still being live streamed to YouTube for the general public. As a reminder, council members must have their audio and video on to participate in the meeting, but please keep your microphone muted otherwise. Heather, will you call the roll, please?
Yes. Mr. Ronald Beal.
Here.
Mr. Colby Burks.
Here.
Chair Ben Brandsetter.
Here.
Vice Chair Kim Hallbauer.
Here.
Ms. Lori Harper.
Here.
Mr. Lucas Menzer.
Here.
Ms. Donna Moore. Ms. Christy Nelson.
Here.
Mr. Richard Nelson.
Here.
Ms. Vidya Ravichandran. You just joined us here. Dr. Robert Statt.
Here.
Ms. Carol Wright.
Here.
Ms. Cheryl Zimmerman. And Commissioner Jason Glass, whose first day is today. All right. You have quorum, but we don't have any votes today, so I will sign off.
Okay. Great. We do have a new student representative, and in Colby. And Colby, you've got a great view of the background for yourself. And I think this is his first full council meeting. Is that correct, Colby?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I know we've participated in a couple committee meetings, so that's good. I think almost everybody on the council is on the video stream today. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd like for everybody to kind of go around and just introduce themselves, say how long they have been on the council, and what committee they're serving on right now. So we'll just probably go through the order. So maybe Heather, if you could direct everybody so we can get through that, that'd be great.
Hey, Ron Beal.
Hi, Colby. Welcome. Ron Beal, live in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Been on the council. Heather and Ben can probably correct me, but I think it's approaching 4 years.
Yep, 4 years.
And currently serving on the executive committee, and served on a few other committees over the years. So again, welcome.
All right, Ben.
Colby, Ben Brandsetter, been on about 4 years as well. Currently serve on the executive committee and chairing the finance committee as well.
Okay, and Kim.
Hi, good afternoon, Colby. My name's Kim Hallbauer, and I've been on the council for about 3 years, maybe a little more. Time flies when you're having fun. I serve on the executive committee, the finance committee. I help Dr. Statt with the diversity and inclusion committee that has a much fancier name, which I'm forgetting. And also am the KET representative for the board.
Okay.
And Ben and Kim, you guys forgot to tell Colby that you're from Boone County.
Thank you, Ron. Yeah, we do have a tradition of naming the county that we're from. Ron is actually from Warren County, not Bowling Green. I'm from Boone County, and Kim is actually from Campbell County. So that'll help you with your geography around the state.
Lucas, or no, I'm sorry, I missed Lori.
Great. Hi, Lori Harper, and I am from Trigg County, and years of service might be about 2.5. I can't remember, to be honest. And I serve right now on the academic and strategic initiatives, and you attended our committee, so I appreciate your opportunity to come early, even though you weren't, quote, officially on, maybe?
Yeah, I think he was. So let's see, Lucas.
Hi, Luke Menser. I'm from Fayette County, or Lexington. I've been on the council for about 4 years, and I serve on the Academic Affairs Committee, and I'm also a representative to KET with Kim.
Okay. Donna Moore, her position actually expired on December 31, and in June she said she was not serving, but her position is still, I think she's still actively appointed. So anyhow, that's why she's not here. Christy.
Hi, I'm Christy Nelson. I am from Boone County, Kentucky. I have been serving on the board for 3 years now, just a little over 3, and currently serving on the executive committee.
Okay. Richard?
Yeah, Richard Nelson here. I live in Trigg County. I was appointed to CPE last year, about a year ago, confirmed by the Senate. I think it was back in January. I serve on the Finance Committee. And welcome aboard, Colby.
Dr. Stack?
I'm the campus rep or the faculty rep for CPE. I started on 2013, and I'm in real life a professor at the University of Louisville at the Health Science Center. My committees are Finance, Academic Affairs, Executive Committee, and I chair the Committee on Equal Opportunity. That's what it's called, Kim.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Sure.
So he's on every committee, essentially.
Well, and actually, I represent the faculty of all the state schools, but I call Oldham County my home.
Yeah. All right, Carol?
Hi, Colby. I am Carol Wright, and I live in Jackson County, Kentucky. You might want to get your map to find that one. And I've been on the council for 4 years as well, and I am on the Finance Committee and the Nominating Committee. Welcome aboard.
All right. Well, that's all we have. Do you want to move? Go ahead.
Colby, do you want to give a quick?
Oh, did you?
Oh, there's video.
Sorry.
Hi. No, that's okay. Hey, Colby. I think we had a chance to meet in the last committee meeting. Been on the council for 4 years, and I serve on the academic committee. Welcome.
And Colby, if you could give us a brief introduction for those who haven't had a chance to meet you yet also.
Yeah, it's great to meet all of you all. My name is Colby Burks. I did my undergraduate at Morehead State, and now I'm at the University of Louisville Law School for the next 3 years now, and I'm really enjoying it so far. They haven't scared me off in about a month and a half, so it's going good so far. I got to know a lot about the CPE from chairing the Board of Student Body Presidents this past year. Was the Student Body President at Morehead, and I'm just really excited to get started with the CPE. And I'm really excited about my committee assignments. I think I've gone to 2 committee meetings so far, and they've been really informative and a lot of fun. And I'm just really excited to try to bring kind of my experience at Morehead. I think I have a unique opportunity because I went to a regional university like Morehead, and now I'm going to such a large institution like the University of Louisville. And so I think I have the opportunity to bring a unique perspective because I know the needs of students at U of L and the needs of students at Morehead are going to differ greatly. And then not to talk too much, I also am really interested in how higher education can be made more of a possibility for those with disabilities. My brother suffers from epilepsy, and we made Morehead State the first seizure smart college in the country, which was awesome. And so I'm really interested to use my experiences with people with disabilities and education and try to help out students of the Commonwealth in that way too. But I'm just really excited to get started. And once again, it's nice to meet all of you all.
All right, thank you, Colby. We're going to move on into our panel discussion as part of our workshop session today. So given the change and uncertainty facing higher education, we've invited 3 of our presidents to join us, and they're already on the Zoom call and actively keeping up with people. They represent our public universities, our community technical college system, and our private colleges and universities. This is an opportunity both to hear from them and to ask questions. So we do want to make this interactive, and we do greatly appreciate them taking time out of their schedule to join us today. And hopefully it's good to see some friendly faces from both seeing them and for them to see us as well. So presidents, we'll give you guys a quick hello. But everybody should be able to find you on there. But we've got Robert Jackson from Murray State University, Scott Williams from Owensboro Community and Technical College, and Burden Webb from the University of Pikeville. Travis has a square today, and he's going to be facilitating this discussion. So Travis, I'm going to turn this over to you, and I think the goal is to try to be done around 4 o'clock. Then we'll take a short break, and then we'll talk about our work plan for the rest of today. So Travis, I'm going to turn it on over to you.
Okay, great. We're going to use for board members, we're going to use the raise hand function. Do folks know how to do that on their, you can do this too, but I think there's a function on Zoom where you can use it. If you want to speak, we'll try to note that. I hope this, we'd like for this to be as interactive as possible. Please ask questions at any point. The less I talk, the better. So yeah, just be sure and jump in whenever you'd like and ask a question, and then presidents just jump in and answer, and we'll make this as interactive as possible, and hopefully we'll learn a lot today. But I'll just start off and with each of you guys. I'll start with President Jackson. Obviously, this fall is unlike any other we've experienced, and I mean we know you've all moved courses online, but how has COVID-19 forced Murray State to change?
Travis, thanks. First, before I start, it's good to see everyone, and Chair Brandstetter and members of the council. Thank you for the invitation, and look forward to. I've visited with all of you over the last few years, and appreciate the work that you do on behalf of higher education in the Commonwealth. And just for the record, I'm in Callaway County, so we can. The far western part, even farther west than Trigg, Richard and Lori. So what has changed? Travis asked me that question. Dr. Thompson asked me that question. President Thompson a couple of weeks ago. It's everything, and it's not just in higher education. It's our economy in general, our businesses. Each of you have been impacted by it, but I think that higher education, Murray State University in particular, and as the convener of the university presidents, I'll try to speak as globally as I can on behalf of all the institutions. But this is overused. This is unprecedented. It's unimaginable. It's 24/7 in dealing with it. Every day there is almost an hourly pivot in some manner. Whether we're dealing with issues on the campus in order to keep the campus community safe and healthy, or it's budgetary and planning matters. In the environment we're in, it is almost impossible to do any type of long-term planning. It has been for months, because we spend each and every day reacting to something, and those somethings are pretty significant. The biggest items that we find ourselves responding to, and I think all of my presidential colleagues would agree with this, are the financial components. And many of them are extremely unpredictable as we speak. So on the public university side, we were notified just a few days ago that we may see a significant appropriation cut from the Commonwealth. So that's one big item. The second big item, and we're very grateful for the federal stimulus assistance that we received in the spring, but we need federal stimulus assistance in the fall. And all of us are facing the need for that. And at this point in time, Congress has not been able to agree on that particular topic. So that's a significant unknown for all of us, and is causing a lot of unnecessary or necessary but unplanned, maybe is a better way to say it, planning on behalf of all of our institutions. Probably, if there's one big global theme of what has this caused us to think about in the last several months, COVID-19, the global pandemic, has caused us to look at existing inherent structural issues to higher education, especially public higher education, that already existed. So I think Warren Buffett had a great quote, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't remember it exactly, but when the tide goes out, you get to see who's swimming without swim trunks. And the tide went out. and it exposed a lot of issues that we're all dealing with, especially again the public higher education piece, pensions, KERS pension rates. So that issue's been magnified. The lack of appropriations or adequate appropriations. Our appropriations have been cut about 20% in the last 12 years. The federal stimulus unknown that I mentioned, and that list goes on and on. So Travis, those are some of the big items that we're daily planning for. And while all this is going on, we've all become healthcare professionals. We've had to be. We've become monitors on our campuses. We're speaking daily to our students and our faculty and staff, but our job right now, and outside of teaching and learning, job one's keeping the campus community safe and healthy.
Well, thanks so much, President Jackson. President Williams, I'd like to pose the same question to you. Obviously, it's a little bit different circumstances than Murray State University, which is a residential campus, and obviously you don't have any dorms there in Owensboro. But what's changed for you guys down in the community college sector? You're still muted, Dr. Williams.
You'd think after all these months of using Zoom and Teams that we'd figure that out, don't you?
Hey, we're ready to answer though. I like that.
Thank you much. And as President Jackson said, I do want to also say hello to all of the CPE board members and thank you for the opportunity. So I can reiterate a lot of what President Jackson said, that all of those things are also facing us here at the community college level as well. So some of the things that are unique, though, that I think, as you've already raised or brought to the forefront, is for us in the Kentucky Community Technical College system, we obviously don't have residential students, and that's an area that we do not have to deal with, nor do we have athletics and those types of things. However, what's changed for us significantly, just kind of on the ground, so to speak, so I'm going to take a little different approach, in addition to all the finance issues that we have to deal with, in addition to, the planning that's almost nearly impossible now, especially long-term planning. But what's changed for us kind of on the ground has been our interaction with students. And of course, being a commuter campus, we've really worked hard over the years to engage students to be more involved on campus and to try to keep them active on campus and active in their classwork and active as being a student so that they persist through their education. And of course, what's probably the most significant change has been that because we are now in a mode where we are limiting campus availability. And of course, we have to do that in order to keep everybody safe and healthy. So we continue to work on that and work through that. So that's been a big change. Also working with students in order to make sure that they continue to persist is something that is also changed. So now we're having to do that more in a remote mode, even though our campus services here and through all the 16 colleges, we're open, the students are on campus, they can access these, but many people under this pandemic have chosen to work as remotely as they possibly can. So we work with those issues to keep those students engaged and persisting towards their educational goals. And so, those are areas in which we have seen significant changes up to this time. The other thing that we have seen significant changes in, and that is, and some of this I think is for the positive. Dr. Jackson mentioned this, when the tide went out, we could see what some of those gaps were. And so it gave us an opportunity to really look at our delivery mechanisms, how we can be more adaptive and flexible in how we deliver higher education to our constituents and our students. And so that really has given us an opportunity over the last several months and before we started the fall term to really look at that hard, prepare, And we've implemented some areas in which we've been able to deliver, I think, in a much more effective manner because of what we learned in the spring and that quick pivot that we had to make at that time. And so, you know, while there are many hardships and there are things that we will continue to deal with on a daily and into the future, I think there will be some benefits. There are some silver linings, if you will, and that is it's really given us an opportunity to really hone in and enhance how that student-centered learning process. So, Travis, that's what we're dealing with right now.
President Webb, I'd like to ask you the same question, and so obviously sort of skew it more towards the private college sector, which obviously University of Pikeville is. And also too, I'd like to hear, you know, your osteopathic medical school, your optometry school, and I know they're all out in the communities and engaging folks in the clinicals, and would like to hear some about how that's going as well and how that's changed.
Thank you. Well, first, let me just add my words of thanks for being invited to speak today representing small private institutions. I think that everyone on this committee understands that, you know, small private institutions represent a very significant number of the graduates that come out of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And even though we don't receive state appropriations, we do still receive aid in terms of the scholarships and other things that our students get for being able to come. So thank you for the role that you play in that. It's certainly a very important role. Like my colleagues, a lot of things have changed. You know, when the pandemic hit back in March and we became aware that we needed to pivot online, we did that. I feel like we were well prepared for it because we had gone through a transition in our learning management system approximately 18 months before, and I had 91% of my faculty who were certified to teach online, even though we only had a dozen online classes. So we had already made that investment in faculty development, and it really paid off when March came, because literally in 2 days, they were able to pivot their classes and they offered very high quality content to our students online. And that includes our medical and optometry colleges who also pivoted online very, very rapidly. In the summer months, we were able to, of course, prepare for the fall. And so we made some decisions that I think are going to prove to be strategic in the long term that benefited our students in many ways. First of all, we expanded the Pikeville Promise, which, as you all, I think, is a program that we have that allows students who receive full Pell Aid and Keys and Kia money to come, and we waive the rest of tuition. So they can come at a greatly reduced price, and we find that those students are very successful in moving through their undergraduate experience. So we expanded that from only Pike County and the surrounding counties to anyone in the Commonwealth. So any student who meets those criteria can come here and we waive the rest of tuition. Then we said, you know, 16 weeks online is just too long. All of the data shows that students can't be successful if we do need to move back online. So we pivoted all of our courses into 8-week blocks instead of 16-week long semesters. That allowed us to have students only in 2 classes at a time instead of 4 or 5, which means that if we have a student who gets an infection and we have to quarantine some of their peers, we're only quarantining them out of 2 classes and not out of 5. And that's been a really important thing as we move forward. It also helps the students to be successful in those classes. We've looked at all the volume of data. There's an enormous amount of data that 8-week long terms are better for students in many ways than 16-week long semesters. So we're not sure yet if we're going to keep that, but the evidence seems to be pointing to the fact that we may. The other thing that we did at the same time, we thought if faculty are already redesigning their courses from 16 weeks to 8, we've been talking for the last 2 years about moving to open educational resources, OER, as a source of textbook materials. And we made that decision. We're going to pivot the whole campus to OER. So we sent out a message to our faculty and or to our students and their parents and said, look, that $1,000 you used to spend on textbooks, it's gone. We think that we can find all the educational materials we need in the public domain, and we have. And that's been very successful as well. So our students now have 100% of them have access to their texts. They don't have to buy used texts or rent things that they have to turn back in. And many of them weren't even buying texts because we serve a population that is a really low SES population. So we pivoted all of those things, and what we've seen is that we have had enrollment that is very, very close to last year's enrollment. Our retention rates have gone up significantly. We're over 80%. When I started this job 5 years ago, we had hit a low point of 38% the year before. And so the undergraduate college is really thriving. As for the medical school and the optometry college, they have done extraordinarily well. We've had one case of COVID in the optometry college. That person happened to be sitting at a table with one other person who 6 weeks earlier had had COVID and was immune. So we didn't have to do anything with that other than just isolate the student who came up positive. Our medical students had a slightly different experience. We had 4 students who tested positive on arrival. We test all students when they come just to make sure that they're clean when they land here. It gives us a baseline. 4 tested positive. We told them that they needed to isolate themselves. 2 of them chose to go to a party. And so we had 23 medical students who started their medical school experience in quarantine. They weren't happy. My dean wasn't happy. A lot of people weren't happy. But since that time, we have had 0 cases in the medical school. I think that they are being obsessively careful now because they don't want to be the next case, which is a very good thing. So they're doing very well. Our 3rd and 4th year medical students, of course, are out on rotation, and they're doing well. Some of them have limited access to the clinic. It just depends on the site where they are. So our site here in town, Pikeville Medical Center, has been very open and allowed our students to go on the variety of services that they need to see. And of course they make, we provide PPE and then they wear it out into the clinics, and they've been safe so far. But other sites, sometimes there's a hospital that says we don't want students right now. There's just too much risk for liability. And so we'll put them into an experience that's different than the true clinical experience, but it gives them some sense of what they need to know. Our 4th year optometry students are the ones that are out on clinical service, and they're doing extremely well. Also, we did have one of those test positive, but of course they hadn't been in town in Pikeville. So, they tested positive, they isolated there, and that's, I believe, passed now, so they should be okay. Other than that, I think we're doing quite well. For those of you who don't know, Pike County is in the far eastern part of Kentucky. We are the tip of the spear, if you will. Right between Virginia and West Virginia, and 2 miles from interstates in every direction.
Thanks so much, President Webb. I'll jump back to you, President Jackson. You mentioned earlier, biggest issue is keeping students safe. What types of things are you doing to do that, to try and keep students safe? How are you communicating to families that, you send your child to Murray State, we'll do our best to keep them safe? How are you trying to communicate to the campus community in order to keep each other safe? You mentioned having calls earlier from families before we started the discussion here, before we were online, about taking calls. And so I'm just curious as to how that process is going.
Sure. Keeping a residential campus safe and healthy is not the easiest thing to do in the middle of a pandemic, as I think President Webb would confess to also. It's tough. Now, we've had relatively few cases. Also, from last week to this week, we've actually trended down. So that's a positive. And I think the main thing that we're doing, I speak to a student group or groups each and every day. And you can go to a website that we created many months ago called the Racer Restart website. And it's got Q&A and videos. And we're talking to student groups regularly, especially higher risk student groups. Maybe Greek organizations would fall into that category as an example on a residential campus. We're sending out daily, sometimes multiple times a day, communications, wearing a mask. They're required on this campus. They were required on this campus before they were required more broadly. Doing things, and we stress this, simply making good choices. And we talk about that regularly. I sent an email this morning to every student on this campus And again, we'll probably do it at the end of the week. We've been doing it once or twice a week on top of social media communications that we're doing with our particular students, as well as meeting with them individually, pleading with them. We want to stay on this campus for the full semester. We want them to stay on this campus the full semester. So we're trying to show them the way to help us help them throughout this process. So obviously we have a health services operation on our campus that's managed by a large family practice clinic in this community. So we have testing capabilities, all the other capabilities to take care of and keep the campus safe and healthy from that standpoint as well. So I mean, I think we're doing about everything one can do in the middle of a global pandemic to keep everyone safe and healthy. And so far, so good, knock on wood. Cross your fingers, say a prayer for all of us, because it's not easy. And again, I think my colleagues would say that, and we're managing it fairly well. So I've been really proud of that, because when you're dealing with 18, 19, 20, and 21-year-olds primarily, it's not the easiest thing to do, right? And so we're taking the time to probably, Travis, above everything else, is good communication, letting them see us, letting them see me with a mask on regularly, walking across campus, and really stressing those types of points.
I'm going to ask Dr. Williams a question, but while I'm doing that, you guys think of questions that you all have, board members. I know this isn't a shy group. We want to hear from you guys. I know you have some. So, but I'll ask Dr. Williams this question. You mentioned limiting interactions on campus and how you're having to do that. And that's sort of contrary to what you've tried to do before. But so how do you do that and still continue to engage students, particularly some of those low-income students or minority students, that need that high touch, high engagement in order to be successful?
Absolutely, Travis. And so, in order to meet the guidelines that we need to follow and, limit, we're working to, under the guidelines that we're trying to keep our campus to about half the occupancy that it normally would have. And manage and such. And of course, as Dr. Jackson said, we're following all the protocols that you would normally see out there, doing healthy check-ins. Everybody wears a mask. Everything's set up to be socially distanced, no congregating areas and those types of things. And so our population in particular is, rather than containing them on campus, they're all, over about almost 90% of our students are working. Many of them work full-time jobs. And so, we're dealing with them and their activities, their career or working activities, and then coming on the campus and trying to make that as safe as possible. So what we have done is we have really tried to set up a structure in which we are broad-based to give flexibility to students. So if they truly want that remote only process or that remote only, they can work in that manner. And then we have what we would call a hybrid process that brings many and most of the students on campus at some point. So that may be in certain classes, that may be in a freshman experience class. And so we're working with those, especially the populations you talked about, those underserved populations. We're engaging them through that manner to bring them on campus in a safe manner so that they can actually engage in certain activities. And so also bringing them on campus so that through coursework that requires hands-on skills and so forth, there would normally, it's hard to do a lot of those things remotely, so they're coming on campus to do those. So we're specifically looking at ways in which we can strategically engage them through activities. And so we're almost setting it up and trying to hone it so that those populations have an opportunity to be on campus and get the high touch services that they need to help them strengthen their experience, their higher education experience with us. And so, and I think that's been very helpful. You know, we work with students every day. Just like Dr. Jackson said, it's a key is educating them, making sure that they understand and feel comfortable, making sure that they understand, don't come to campus if you don't feel well, if you're sick, you know, and it's okay. We'll make sure you make up your work. Don't worry about coming if you feel ill to expose potentially many other people. And so students, I will say, and I say this to our faculty and staff every day, and I think I speak entirely across the community, the Kentucky Community Technical College system, and that is very proud of our students. They have really handled this extremely well. They've handled this in a responsible manner. You know, while it is in, you know, these are things we don't want to have to deal with, but they've dealt with them in a very, very responsible manner. And so they've really helped us to not only start our semester, but we're 4 weeks into our semester, and it's been very successful. I mean, I'll be honest with you, we've had 2 positive cases on campus in 4 weeks. So things have gone very well, and I really attribute that to our students and our faculty and staff. So.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, I know that flexibility is important. I'm glad you're able to offer that. Chair Brandstetter, you had a question?
Yeah, and you know, a lot of time on at our meetings we talk a lot about you know, key performance indicators and metrics, and I feel kind of lost not having that stuff right now. So, you know, President Webb, you touched on 2 items. One is enrollment growth and retention, and you said your enrollment is kind of either flat or a little bit up, I can't remember, but your retention number was significantly higher. You know, I guess President Jackson and President Williams, I'd like to ask you guys the same question just to give us a sense of scale, because obviously, you know, when this thing first started going out, it was a doomsday scenario. The world's going to end, nobody's going to go to college, but now we're talking about managing it. So the world hasn't ended. We're still here. We're still doing education. We've figured it out. How are we doing it, and how are our traditional metrics looking to give us a sense of actual scale from, you know, we're midway through September right now. So President Jackson, maybe if you wouldn't mind going first.
Chair, thank you. A very good question, and like President Webb noted, our actual enrollment indicators are up as well. So let me break out the pieces. First-time freshmen are up about 4.5%. Second year in a row. Last year they were up about 7.7%. And at Murray State University, we have really focused on recruiting for the last couple of years hard in our region, in our multi-state region, and across the state. And so we've had back-to-back years of first-time freshmen up, first-time transfers up double digits, first-time graduate students up double digits. So our first-time student numbers are up considerably. The area where we're down will be international credit hours. We look at credit hours very closely, as I suspect President Williams and President Webb do as well. Credit hours in the international population are down, but our dual credit program, what we call our Racer Academy, is down as well, just because of, you know, K through 12 opening at different times. Some are remote, some are face-to-face, et cetera. We're down there as well. So those credit hours are down. But in the areas where we need to be up, we're up. I'm very proud of that. A lot of people work very hard in those areas. And overall, our overall head count, because of the dual credit program and international, we will be flat to down about 1% in credit hours. So we're very pleased with that.
President Webb, you go ahead, President Williams.
I was just going to real quickly say, for us, it's a slightly different picture, and this is endemic, to be quite honest with you, of community colleges across the nation. Enrollment at community colleges has been down this year, this fall, compared to the previous several years. And so within KCTCS, overall, it's down. Here at Owensboro, we right now, we kind of leveled off while we're down. We're only about less than 2% down in credit hours delivered. Where we're seeing our downward slope is in that adult population, which is a vast majority of our students, kind of that 24 and up. I think a lot of it is the pandemic has turned their life topsy-turvy. They didn't know, am I going to have to work with my children at home and with remote learning that K through 12, and should I enroll in courses? So I think we saw a lot of that. And unlike what Dr. Jackson's seen, is our dual credit is actually up this year. So we saw an uptick in dual credit. However, we're seeing not as strong as we would have liked in that adult population. So persistence has not changed that much from one semester to the other, which we're extremely ecstatic about and happy to see that trend be in a positive manner. So I hope that helps answers those questions,
Yeah.
Travis.
Jerry Branstad, I might add, if I could, to President Williams' points. I don't think I answered this. Our retention numbers are up as well, over 80%. For our early indicators, we monitor very closely internally, so we're very pleased with that. So our underrepresented minority students are up also. We were very concerned about that in the middle of this. So we're in the middle of this global pandemic. So they're up about 6%. Where I am concerned, and I think this is something the council can assist with as well going forward, there is a tremendous need. We knew this previously, but it has been magnified by this pandemic, is aid, need-based aid. And we're seeing that more and more on this campus. I'm sure my colleagues are seeing that on their campuses. The issue of need-based aid is great and growing. And in this environment with higher unemployment, with the concerns, financial issues we're dealing with, it's something that we must continue to focus on.
Dr. Thompson, do you have a comment on?
Yeah, I do. A couple of quick comments just to point out that this is going to Scott. In times like this and downturns in the economy, community colleges have a lag point. If you look at the trends over the last 15 years, a lag point of 6 months.
Yes.
So right now it may not tell you anything, but 6 months it tells you more, right? So I just wanted to make clear that everybody understand the statistical significance of the down. The other thing too, in Kentucky, this is very much like the rest of the US, that 86% of those that have been laid off and are drawing unemployment are people with no college of any kind. Mm-hmm. So this is another item that we need to be thinking about as we think about policy and pushing, if you will. And this really hits home, I think, to all of the presidents here, but Scott, maybe a little more to you, is to really focus on how can we get those short-term certificates and getting people out there that can be stackable later on to some other areas. So I wanted to point that out as we're having this discussion.
Absolutely. And if I might add quickly to that, Dr. Thompson, because you bring up a very good point. The areas that we are really focusing on right now is exactly what you said. We are working closely with not only our workforce partners, but our industry, businesses in industry. And we already have many, especially in these areas. I heard some of y'all mention earlier, you were having trouble finding employees. Your businesses are back up and running strong and you need employees. So we've been partnering with our industry here locally with short-term certificates to reach out to this populations, these underserved, underskilled populations, or even dislocated workers, tying those with short-term certificates to give them some rapid skill attainment that is stackable towards a 2-year credential and getting them back into the workforce towards more of a career for those individuals. And so we're seeing that starting to be very successful. There are a lot of training dollars that we've been able to tap into to help with that. And so this is an area that all 16 of us in KCTCS are really focusing on and working towards. That in turn has been enhanced by our work-based learning program. So many of the colleges in the KCTCS system have have what we call project-based or work-based learning programs in which individuals can work in the same field they're studying, and it gives them an opportunity to move forward and advance their careers. And we're seeing a lot of success in those areas. So Dr. Thompson is exactly right. Those are starting, and I think we will see once the uncertainty begins to dissipate, that we will see individuals really back engaged, and we'll see those numbers come back up because you know, that's what we're here and what we're here to do. So thank you for mentioning that, Dr. Thompson.
I think Christy had a comment on this, and then Colby's got a question, and then Dr. Stat's got a question. So go ahead, Christy.
So I'll start by saying that higher ed is everything in my life. And I had a very traditional 4-year experience on a college campus that was amazing, and same with law school. But this pandemic has accelerated change in higher ed by at least 10 years, if not more. And I will tell you that when I used to drive past the Florence Mall, I saw it dying on a vine, retail going down the tubes. That was before pandemic, okay? The pandemic now is shutting it down, and stores are closing all around us. So I don't want anyone to be naive to think that this is just going to be over and we're going to resume our normal way of educating. It wasn't just a year ago, we were sitting around a table in Frankfurt and heard the student body presidents say that for the first time, all of them are struggling with how they can justify the cost of education and the return on investment. And we're not talking about regional, we're talking about regional and comprehensive, all sitting around asking that question. And then we had Dr. Crow come in, President Crow from ASU, and talk to us about the New American University. And in the room outside of the meeting, people saying, we can't do that in Kentucky. Well, let me tell you, there's some kids this semester who didn't re-enroll at the University of Kentucky, and they're doing online education at ASU because the courses are a fraction of the price because they've mastered the e-learning. These devices have changed everything about how we're going to do business, how we're going to get educated. And I know that I sound like I'm throwing a big bucket of cold water on everyone here, but when we start thinking about making capital investments in infrastructure on campuses, we better be looking at how we can consolidate operations and drive savings to deliver education and how we're going to deliver it. Do I want us to depend on virtual learning? Absolutely not. I absolutely totally favor in-class, on-campus living and learning. But the reality is life around us is changing. And in many ways, I can tell you, if I was in commercial real estate, I'd be looking for another job today because my business is one of many that are looking at virtual long-term work from home opportunities. And companies are, and learning is going to go that way as well. And as long as the cost of education continues to outpace other things in society like wages, the change is going to continue. So, I mean, this is more of an editorial comment, but I totally applaud everything that everyone has done to be resilient during the pandemic. But if we don't take this as a wake-up call in Kentucky and figure out a way to transform the way we deliver education in this state and start modernizing and think that we're going to continue to force kids into a college campus, we're going to continue to struggle to attract students. And the competition out there is going to eat our lunch. If it's not now, it'll be 10 years from now. I'll go back on mute.
Thanks, Christy. Colby, you had a question? Been waiting for a little while. Go ahead.
Yeah. Before I get to my question, I just also wanted to say I think the future is going to involve a lot of online education. I mean, there's some universities right now that are offering full degrees through online means. And I've heard of instances where soldiers will be in deployment overseas and will be taking online degree classes at different schools. So I think I just wanted to input that before I get to my question. I think if Kentucky can input a lot of online techniques for classes, that'd be amazing. My question, though, was kind of a general question. Whoever wants to answer is, I've been seeing a lot of different students being affected by school during COVID-19 differently. I've had students that are missing, that some classes are hybrid, and so they're required to go part of the time, but they don't feel comfortable doing that, whether they live with their parents who are higher risk or not. And so they're having to take all their classes online. And then on the flip end, a few days ago, I was sent a 10-page letter from a third-year law student stating how it was a violation of his constitutional rights to get tested and to wear a mask. And so I guess there's such a dichotomy between students. How are universities handling trying to come up with policies that are going to best reach a middle ground to please both of those groups of students when they're just on a seemingly irrectifiable kind of path away from each other?
President Webb, you want to take this one? Start us off?
Sure, Colby. It's absolutely a dance. I mean, we have to try to be responsive to both sets of students, and yet there are some things that we will not compromise on. So we have a requirement, just like Murray State does, that masks are required on campus, and you have to wear them when you're on campus. You have to wear them when you're in class. We have chairs spaced, 6 feet apart all over the place, just like everybody else does. And that's non-negotiable. If a student refuses to put a mask on or will not do it, then the faculty members are all authorized to walk out the door and cancel the class, and they'll move it online. And the class will be online. But what's been taking place is that the rest of the students in the classroom don't want to go online. And so there's an enormous amount of peer pressure placed on the one student who doesn't want to mask up to say, look, either you mask up or we're all online, and that's not going to happen. So peer pressure has actually taken care of a lot of that. The students who are absolutely refusing to mask, at least on our campus, are a very small minority, and they're shrinking all the time. So policies have to be written with the best interest of student health in mind and faculty health in mind, and that's what we've been doing moving forward. And just a quick comment to Christy's soliloquy over there. It is something that we have to be aware of, and it's something that private higher ed, in fact, is pivoting on probably more quickly than many of our state partners are. We have been developing online programs, fully online programs, for a long time now, and are continuing to do that at a fairly rapid pace. We all have to realize, however, that there are a significant number of students who don't want that. And those students will always be looking for a face-to-face and or residential experience. That won't be everybody, but not everybody goes to college now. So there are some students who will still want that residential face-to-face experience, and we have to accommodate them, as well as accommodating those who prefer or choose to take their coursework online. I've been an advocate of online learning for a long time. I think the best form of learning is actually hybrid learning, where you're sitting in class part of the time and taking some of your content online. I think that the data would prove that out in spades, that the best learning is hybrid learning. So we are pivoting, we're creating programs. I think that's true at Murray State. I know that's true at our KCTCS partners. I know that we have a campus, Big Sandy down the hill, and I can tell you from experience, their parking lot is almost empty all the time. They're taking almost all of their classes online and have been for years. So we are seeing that, but certain courses and certain programs will never be fully online. I can't teach medicine fully online.
And I'm certainly not even advocating that, by all means. I love the traditional. It's at the end of the day, your observations, the hybrid. Again, when we look at capital expenditures and ways that we can maximize the use of facilities on campus to accommodate the in-person, residential college experience is absolutely still something I'm passionate about. But again, we can't stick our heads in the sand. That's all I'm saying.
No, I completely agree with your point, Christy. We absolutely cannot stick our heads in the sand, and we have to be able and willing to pivot when we can.
I agree with President Webb also. And Christy, I think one silver lining, if we could, out of this global pandemic, and again, I think my colleagues would echo this, it is forced us to speed up online and hybrid which we support in total as well. Our offerings of online or hybrid courses are up by 50%, the number of courses. Our summer enrollment was up double digits over last year, 12 to 15%, as I recall. May have been higher than that. It was up significantly. So that, we are investing there. We continue to invest there. We were investing there before the pandemic hit. We'll continue to invest there. But there are many students who do want a true residential experience. We're a true residential university, and obviously we're going to cater to everyone we possibly can in that regard. I think an important point also in regard to, and Colby, you may have mentioned this, is the issue of cost or affordability. Nearly half of our students leave this institution with a degree and no student debt. And there was, I think, an article in the Lexington Herald today, and Murray State ranks extremely well in that regard. I'm very proud of that, but almost 50% of our students leave here with no student debt. That's very important to us. That's a marketing point why one should come to Murray State University. I can't speak to anyone else, but I can speak to if you're here at Murray State, that's the case. So affordability is important, and it will continue to be as we go forward. That's something that's going to change as post-pandemic.
President Thompson, you want to comment on this?
Yeah, a quick comment. I'm not going to disagree with anything anyone's ever said. I'm just going to add a couple of things that that I believe should be added. The presidents and I have these discussions all the time, Christy, just to let you know. I mean, on a regular basis, that innovation has to take place now and not just in the future. And even, I mean, Burton's absolutely right. Hybrid has been shown to be the most quality and the most effective. But even beyond that, it's more than just instruction. And I just want to be clear about that. Instruction is something that can be designed to be delivered at a faster rate, even at a lesser expensive rate. The issue that we have that we're trying to work through that's going to offer the full most innovation, in my opinion, is how do we handle these other items that forever higher education has been high touch with? The mental health issues, the issues that are growing so fast that we can't keep up with, that's having a huge effect on not just college retention, but the college going. I mean, and it's not, I don't disagree that we should focus on delivery. I'm with you on that, and even at a more affordable level than we could even think about at this point in time. But I don't want us to forget about, as we think about innovation, are all those other items that many of our students that had issues before weren't getting very well, but now even more, and COVID has created that. This digital divide, another huge issue that's popped out at us so hard and so fast. We knew about it before, but this has brought out the full extent. We got at least 25% of our students, both K-12 and higher ed, not getting the kind of access they need for quality learning. So I just wanted to throw that into as we're talking about this, not just look at the instructional part of it.
Thanks, Dr. Thompson. Dr. Stat, you had a question?
Yes, actually, for Dr. Webb, he commented, and I'm going a little on educational theory at times, but going to 8-week terms. I assume that the content was the same as the old 16-week term, but there's some debate on the maturation of knowledge. Is the maturation of knowledge equal in the 8-week versus the 16-week?
There is quite a bit of evidence to say that it is. On our campus, we're still studying that. And that's actually going to be, I think, one of the key points in whether we decide to stay at 8-week terms or we move back to 16. From my point of view, I think that the results will drive that decision more than anything else. We need to make sure that our students are learning and that they're able to hold on to that content. The thing that we see that seems to be accelerating the maturation of knowledge is the amount of time that students are spending with the content. when they're taking 5 courses at once, there's a limited amount of time with the content, and now they're getting a far more intense amount of focus time, and they're able to truly integrate that content rather than hitting this and then going to that. So if they weren't ping-ponging, which is what medical students do all the time, then they're spending more time with it, and that seems to be helping. But again, we're 4 weeks in, so I really need to answer that question next year at this time.
Dr. Stat, let me jump in and just say research shows 3 things around those short terms. One is if they meet on a regular basis, they have pure classes that are offered so they can go deeper. And the third thing, which has proven to be fairly substantive, is that these sorts of short terms have a bigger effect on those that needs the high touch and the high inputs more often, in which if you set up the 8 semester courses correctly, then they do have even a chance for deeper learning. But a part of that also is that we move away from what we call the testing mentality, that it's not about rote, but it is about high hands-on, I guess, even if it's online, and the ability to really be able to apply the knowledge in a faster, quicker way between the theory and the action. So I think that's what the research really shows in that area.
And actually, I may have this wrong, but this morning on my drive in, I heard on the news that didn't Murray State and Dr. Jackson get some accolades from U.S. News and World Report?
Dr. Stat, we did. For the 30th straight year, 30 consecutive years, we've been recognized as by U.S. News and World Report as one of the top public universities in the country again. So, those are things that...
Congratulations first.
Thank you. Thank you. Those are things that we're proud of, that we promote. But to me personally, the thing that I value the most, yes, that ranking, but being recognized as one of the top values in this country. I think in this day and age, we have a responsibility to the families and students of this Commonwealth to really promote that component. So those are things we're all proud of, and thank you for pointing that out.
Thanks, Dr. Jackson. Kim, you had a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of expand on something that I heard earlier and maybe collectively pull things together. I know we're over time, so I want to be sensitive to that. But I am really impressed with the concept of the Pikeville Promise and the fact that you've been able to expand that across the state. And I'm very curious around where does the funding come from to allow that to happen? Because when we think about the challenges that we face around the cost component of education, obviously you're seeing fabulous success, and I'm curious as to how we could leverage that and make that a little more impactful.
Well, it's not a separate source of funding, really. So we have a tuition that we've set at a fairly low rate for a private institution. We set just a little over $20,000 for tuition annually, and our discount rate runs just below 50%. So that means our actual income net tuition that we get from students is a little over $10K. And by the time you add up the maximum Pell Award, CAP KTG, and everything else, it's just slightly under that number. So for us, the investment is worth that. For us to have students, most of our students live on campus, though not all. And so by the time they invest in, room and board, which frankly is a whole lot lower than the public universities for our room and board. But most our residence halls aren't new, they're all paid for. So we don't have those kinds of debt issues associated with our residence halls. We're able to make that work. And we do have some net revenue that comes in outside of that traditional undergraduate revenue structure that also helps to offset any cost differential there. So it's just been a great way for us to grow the campus a little bit and to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the students who are particularly low income. And I don't know if you remember, there was a study done about upward financial mobility. Last year, I think, was the last time it was done. We ranked number 2 in the state for that. So the vast majority of our students come from the bottom 2 quintiles of SES, and we average 2 quintiles of upward mobility for our students. So we think that's important. You find students who are talented, who have the ability to learn, but happen to come from a lower SES. If we invest in them in the right way, with the right amount of time, we can help them to move, and that moves whole family structures out of poverty. And we think that that's really important and missional for us.
Kim, if I could add from Murray State's standpoint, and many of our colleagues, public colleagues, have a program very similar to President Webb's. I applaud him for that program. I know it's been successful. Ours is called the Murray State Promise. 2 years ago, we implemented this statewide program. We call it a gap scholarship. We fund it internally. It's very expensive, but it helps the least. And it helps the students that we should be focused on from a low income standpoint across the Commonwealth. And it has worked very well for us.
Kim, I just might add from the community college system that, you know, obviously access and affordability is at the core of what we do. And I will also say that the Kentucky Work Ready scholarships have been very, very instrumental, especially reaching out to those in most need. And so that's been extremely helpful. Just to kind of tag on to Dr. Jackson and that, you know, we have the vast majority of our students, in fact, 2/3 of our students that graduate debt free. So it certainly gets them a leg up. And the other advantage is as they transfer to a university, that helps to offset some of those costs as well as they continue towards their bachelor's and master's degree. So I think all of us working together really helps to make it a much more affordable experience for students.
Well, and I think that my question comes because I hear both sides. I hear that we see the cost of tuition for students as an impediment to enrollment and to key and retention, but yet there are programs out there that seem to be successful that are addressing those issues, and I'm just trying to kind of think through the disconnect there.
I think the disconnect is just getting the word out. A lot of people just don't hear. I mean, they don't hear, or they're not ready to listen or something. And so getting people to believe that these programs actually exist and getting them to take the time to fill out the FAFSA, any KCTCS school into our program so that they can finish easily in 2 years.
Yes,
and he's
correct.
Exactly right, because it helps students who just didn't think they could make it in college, and they start there and they come all the way through. I even have examples now of students who graduated from medical school in programs like that. Mm-hmm. You know, they've come all the way through and they're in residency now and doing extraordinarily well.
I wanted to add something for the board's sake as we think about this. There's 3 points that comes out of this for me. One is the unique way of creating a pipeline at the lowest cost possible, delivered in the lowest cost possible for the highest learning possible. In other words, we have to do a better job of getting more people through the KCTCS pipelines into our 4-year institutions with a stackable credential. If they want to go to the workforce, fine. But you know, if they want to come back, we shouldn't have hindrance for that. Number 2, I think it's important that people know that in our listening tour, we only found about 3% of the 3,000 people we talked to that even knew about the Work Ready Scholarship, which we have free college. I mean, that tells us something, right? So there was an impression that they couldn't afford to go to college. And the idea that we have to be far more transparent in the way that we list or do our list price versus net cost, as well as letting people know how they can pay for it. And I think that's important. Not just Murray, but UK, several of our campuses have promises. UK you got a $5,000 debt, they will come to your rescue as an example. So these are all the things that we have to, and I think Kim's question is an excellent juxtaposition from the perception versus the reality. Now, I believe there's a reality that we're going to have to keep costs down also with tuition down, you know that. But there's a huge reality of perception, and Ben's looking at his watch saying, I need to quit talking to go on to the next one. But these are the kinds of discussion that I think our council members need to have and think about with us.
Dr. Thompson, you are correct. We are over time with the president's President Jackson, President Webb, President Williams, I appreciate your all's time, your insight, your input, and look forward to seeing you in person as soon as we can. And
good to see everyone.
Good to see everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for the
If
opportunity.
you guys will indulge, I think we'll take about 2 to 3 minute break. Let Heather do her thing, get Zoom back up and running. So if you need to run down the hall, run to the kitchen, or whatever may be convenient for you, let's do that and come back at no later than 4:20, and we'll keep going and look at our work plan. So. Wayne, do we need to go back live? What's the protocol there? Wayne, we need to go back live? What's the protocol? All right. Thanks for sticking with us today. The next section is titled Taking Stock, Progress on CPE's 2020 Work Plan. For those of you who've been around for a while, we would have done our annual retreat by now. We were hoping to be able to do that in person, but that's obviously not going to happen today. But just mainly from lengthy meetings and not being able to get everybody in the same room. So we do want to try to still have that later on this fall. We'll see, just kind of as in typical 2020 fashion, see how things shake out and make a game time decision closer to our next meeting date. However, in the meantime, we did ask staff to give us an update on the progress towards the 2020 work plan and discuss how COVID has shifted some of our priorities and strategies. Lee Nemix is going to start us off with the discussion. President Thompson and other staff are going to join in, and obviously questions will be encouraged, and we'd like to make sure that we give everybody ample opportunity to ask questions and provide their input as well. So if you can continue to use the chat, the raise hand or the chat, and Heather's going to moderate things now. And my screen is shifted, so I've got the kind of the video tile on the right-hand side, and then the content is taking up the bigger part of the middle. So I may not see you, but Lee, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you and just do our discussion. From a timing perspective, I would like to try to wrap up by 5:15 if we can.
Yeah,
we have
sure
a tradition
thing.
of being running long, but I think we can hopefully wrap it up by 5:15 and keep everybody on schedule today.
Well, right. We will do that, Chair Brandstetter, and we will, from a staff perspective, try to go fairly quickly through this material because, as Chair Brandstetter mentioned, we want this to be an interactive discussion. So please jump in with questions or comments. And also other staff, if there are things that you want to add to elaborate, we would welcome those as well. We also see this as sort of just a quick touch base on these issues with the idea that this would be a setup for a more in-depth strategic planning discussion with the board later this year, hopefully in a retreat setting. So Heather, if you can switch to slide 2. So by way of reminder, these are CPE's 4 key priorities that have driven the agency's work plan since Dr. Thompson was appointed president. They are aligned with a larger strategic agenda, but they really zero in on some key issues that we know have a great deal of urgency right now and certainly have taken the attention of the council over the last 2 years. The first is to elevate the message about the importance of post-secondary education. And you've certainly seen a lot of work on this from the council staff through a tremendous communications effort and outreach. Sue Patrick later in the presentation is going to talk more about this. Making the issue of college affordability front and center and working to break down barriers to college for all students. As we just talked about in the latest session of the presidents, I mean, some of these issues, many of these issues are very real, but oftentimes there is a perception issue around college affordability that we need to work to address. We want to keep our focus directly on student success so that students not only enroll, but graduate with a degree or certificate of value. And we know that we need to particularly focus on populations of students who historically have fallen through the cracks, you know, underrepresented minorities, adult students, or what we call our comebackers, or our low-income students. We know that there are significant challenges. So while we might be seeing retention go up at our campuses or enrollment stay steady, we know there's some big gaps with certain populations and their ability to enroll and succeed. And finally, we know that, you know, we can reach our our 60 by 30 goal. We can have 60% of our population with degrees or credentials, but none of this will matter if the students aren't graduating, prepared to enter the workforce, succeed and grow in their jobs, and earn a family-sustaining wage. So as we talk about CPE's work this year, we'll use these priorities as a framework for that discussion, but we also want to remind folks that, you know, our work does extend beyond what can easily be sort of put into one of these categories. So we hope to have some time towards the end of this discussion to talk about those activities as well. But first, let's talk about COVID. As we've shared with you at earlier meetings, COVID has clearly changed the way CPE is working as an organization. We have a core staff that goes into the office regularly, but most of us are still working remotely. And like everybody else in the office world, we have seen some surprising and amazing benefits to this new way of work. As we've talked about before, we are communicating much more frequently. Our meetings are shorter, thankfully, but we're having more of them. And at least from my perspective, a lot of our teams are gelling in ways that they have not before. And in general, time is being used more efficiently. But there are significant challenges that as an organization we're facing due to the pandemic. You know, particularly meetings like this are just not as interactive and quite candidly are probably not as effective. And we've had to be a lot more intentional about making sure all of our staff are supported and engaged. You know, we're trying to help staff manage this work-life balance, which is not easy when your office is your home and your home is in your office. So there's a lot of sort of staff development work that we've been focused on. But in general, the work of the organization is moving along very effectively. And I think that we are being able to accomplish and advance a lot of the priorities that you as a board have put before us. So Heather, if you could move to the next slide. I think one of the significant things that occurred is almost immediately after, you know, it became clear how serious the pandemic was back in March. We really stepped up our role as a coordinator and convener to help share information and provide a stronger link between the campuses and state government. So for example, our president's meetings went from monthly activities to weekly activities. And as President Thompson, I'm sure will attest, you know, individual calls with campus leaders and presidents occur almost daily. So not only does this sort of stepped up communication, convening, better communication between us and the campuses, but we found that it's allowed a lot better communication among campus leaders. They are sharing information and effective practices. It's also allowed us to connect them regularly as a group with Dr. Stack and other members of the public health team. We brought in legal experts to talk with the presidents. We've talked with Budget Director Hicks and others. So there's really been an effort to make CPE in some ways the link or the glue between campuses as a group and state government. We spent a lot of time in the spring and summer providing guidance and communicating with campuses about reopening plans. We've developed templates and required information in the planning process to help you know, effective development. We spend a lot of time reviewing each of the plans, not only for the public institutions, but for all the private colleges. We've shared information with state leaders, including the Department of Public Health, and got them to look at the plans and weigh in. And just recently, for example, we've been working with campuses in the Department of Public Health on an approach to sharing data about COVID on campus to ensure that higher education really is as transparent as possible with the public and data is consistent. We are monitoring and sharing information about the fiscal impact of the pandemic on the campuses. Folks in Bill Shop are regularly soliciting information from the campuses, not only to look at the sort of outlay in terms of costs associated with fighting the pandemic. You know, for example, you know, campuses have invested a ton of money in PPE and sanitation costs, signage, but there's been a tremendous amount of lost revenue. Certainly over the summer, we lost tuition, we lost activity fees, we are losing athletics revenue, we're losing out-of-state tuition. So all of those numbers, we've had our finance folks really digging into those and sharing that information and monitoring it closely. Melissa Bell's shop initiated a series of statewide convenings and ongoing conversations with a lot of campus officials in specific areas to learn how the pandemic is affecting their work and to share strategies and see how we might help them at the state level. You know, for example, she brings together the student affairs leaders, the career services managers, enrollment manager leaders, student success advisors, digital learning leaders. So, you know, all of these conversations, all of these regular convenings have been instrumental in helping sort of cross-fertilization of good ideas, as well as keeping us informed about what the campuses need and how they're being effective. On the communications end, Sue Patrick's shop developed a whole communications campaign early in the pandemic to share how campuses and students have been responding to the pandemic. For example, you know, early in the crisis, campuses stepped up to donate, in some cases develop PPE to support frontline workers. Or they provided emergency facilities to house and care for hospital overflows. So Sue's shop has done roundup stories on things like this, and they've tried to get that story out there to let folks know that higher education has really stepped up and are working in concert with state leaders to mitigate the effects of the pandemic. We've also developed a statewide higher education COVID website with tons of information that's regularly updated. It continues to be updated as things change and as situations evolve. And finally, there's some work that we don't talk about a lot, but there are activities that have gone on that have been tremendously important in how we've responded to the pandemic. For example, we have redeployed several of our staff on a full-time basis to help support folks dealing with the unemployment insurance crisis. So even now, 6 months in, we have, and Travis can correct me, 2 or 3 staff working full-time, fielding calls and helping folks trying to get unemployment. Earlier this spring, and you may have seen this, we were able to provide access to the virtual library, which CPE manages, as you know, to all public libraries and schools to make sure that every citizen in the Commonwealth had access to digital resources. And then a very important role that CPE plays is as an ombudsman. We respond regularly and resolve public complaints or questions. But as you can imagine, over the past 6 months, this area of our work and responsibilities has increased significantly. You know, at least one person's almost full-time job has been spent fielding questions, tracking down information, responding complaints. You know, Travis may want to weigh in on that more, but it's obviously a very important part of our work. I'm happy to answer any questions, just to give you a very quick high-level overview of kind of how the pandemic has shifted our immediate work. But if you don't have questions, I'm going to turn it over to Greg Rush, who's going to talk about how CPE has been involved in the distribution and planning for CARES grant funding.
I think everyone is pretty familiar at this point with the CARES Act. It has it's not solved the problem, but it's helped to some degree limit the economic impact of COVID and the pandemic on our universities. The main part of the act came out in 2 large pots with about $54.5 million, I think, in each one. Half, and these funds went directly to the institutions. Half was used for grants to students, and half was used for campuses to help offset some of the costs and expenses they'd had related to their initial response to the pandemic. In addition to that, the governor of each state received an emergency education fund. And out of this fund, Dr. Thompson and CPE has worked with the governor's office to separate out about $13.8 million of this to support post-secondary education. And these funds are at the discretion of the governor Again, they have some of the same restrictions that the original CARES or the original POTS under CARES had. But we were able to work through a contracting process to allow these funds to be available to our campuses for basically modifications that they may have to make for facilities, acquiring personal protective equipment, enhancements and works they need to do on remote learning, and then they can use some of these funds for grants to students if necessary. And about $1 million of these funds went to our private institutions. The majority, the remainder, went to the public institutions, and a portion, I think about $1.5 million or maybe a little less, been reserved at this point in case we see things happening later in the year that we need to respond to at the state level. And through this whole process, we've been communicating closely with the governor's office and with the campuses, particularly Lee and Bill and Travis, on providing guidance on how these funds can be used and managing the contracts to distribute the funds. Dr. Thompson has been communicating regularly with state and federal folks about CARES funding in general and the need for additional funding as we move through, begin our second 6 months of this response to the COVID pandemic. Right now, discussions of future funding are stalled, although both the bills that have moved through both the House and Senate congressionally have had funding for higher ed. So if a bill is passed, ultimately, there's some optimism that our institutions will see some additional support. Right now, the House has passed a measure of about $3.5 trillion that provides a significant amount of money to state and local governments, to the universities, unemployment insurance, a rather large package. The Senate has not been able to pass a bill, although their last version did receive 52 votes, but not enough to enforce cloture and move the bill. It was at about $500 billion. So the two sides are pretty far apart. As we near the election, there's some speculation that they will begin to chop this into pieces and begin to pass individual components. That may or may not happen within the next 4 or 5 weeks, but it's a possibility at this point. I think our campuses are hopeful for two reasons. One, the budget reduction that the governor, or the budget reduction plan the governor requested with on an 8% reduction, is assuming, as my understanding, that the state does not receive any federal funding to help stabilize revenue or offset COVID expenses in addition to what they've already received. And so if that money were forthcoming, I would imagine that budget reduction would change. And then the other component is the ongoing costs and challenges that campuses have, and hoping for additional support there. And with that, if there's no questions, I'll let Lee pick this back up.
Thanks, Greg. The conversations with the presidents, I think, highlighted most of the items on this slide. We certainly know over the past 6 months, if we didn't know already, that digital learning can be done, that campuses can pivot quickly. And Christy, as you noted, this is going to change the way higher education does business moving forward. It's certainly digital learning and hybrid strategies are here to stay. And I think as a state and as individual institutions, we need to get ahead of that and stay ahead of it. We know the digital divide is real. We talked about that with the presidents. I think this is an area of focus and work that this agency needs to continue to pay attention to, work with our federal and state leaders, because that's what it's going to take. It's going to take really a sort of change in focus in broadband strategies and funding to make sure that everybody has access, whether it's a money issue or a geographic issue. We, as the president's mentioned, mental health, we have known it's been an issue. It's been a growing issue over the past decade or 15 years. But this pandemic has really highlighted and elevated this issue in a way that I think none of us really anticipated. Students are stressed, families are stressed, and they need ongoing assistance. There's anxiety, and it's a matter of resources right now, and we're certainly talking with our campus leadership about ways that at the state level we can help get those resources to students where they're needed. But it's challenging. And I'm going to jump down to the last bullet because this is going to be sort of a segue into the next discussion and moving into one of the key priorities, which is student success. I think the pandemic has really sort of highlighted the need for all of us in education and in the state to focus on transition points. These are sort of, in some ways, vulnerable areas in the pipeline between education and work where we lose students. They drop out, stop out. And so the transition from K-12 to higher education needs to be strengthened and it needs to be streamlined. The transition from KCTCS to four-year campuses for those students who want to transfer, we need to make sure that those pathways are clear and there's no obstacles there that are stopping students in their momentum. And then finally, the transition from higher education into work is something that we know we have to work on and really think about ways to make that process more seamless and more intuitive. And not only moving into the workforce, but for folks in the workforce to move back to post-secondary when they need additional training is something that as a state, I think will take much of our time and energy. So with that, I'm gonna kick things over to Melissa Bell, who's gonna talk about student success in that priority area.
Thank you, Lee, and good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, it is very difficult, as you can imagine, to boil down all our efforts related to student success to one slide. Student success is really the heart of higher education and what we focus so much on, both at the campus level, at the state level. So what I'm going to do is pick out a couple of these bullet points and go into more depth on those because I know that both Dr. Ellis and Dr. Thompson want to jump in and talk about what Lee had just mentioned, these transition points and the some of the equity and diversity efforts that we are focusing on. But one of the main abilities, the main powers of CPE, the CPE staff, is the power to convene people, groups of people. I know it sounds simple, but it really is one of the most important things we do. And so much of our staff time is spent on organizing these meetings, leading these meetings, facilitating these meetings, and then researching and following up on innovative ideas that come out of this meeting. So in addition to the traditional groups that we've met with for many years, such as the presidents and the chief budget officers and the chief academic officers, we are now meeting with distance learning coordinators, teaching and learning center directors, and as you can imagine, we are having some really in-depth conversations about what is a quality online program, an online course, what is a quality hybrid or blended course, and really what is a quality face-to-face course. So it's really deepened these conversations. We're also meeting with career counselors and academic advisors. And one of the goals over the next year is to really bring career counseling and academic advising more in step with one another and looking for innovative ways to do that. We are meeting with mental health counselors. As Lee mentioned, that is a major issue on our campuses, and we're looking for ways for these counselors to learn from one another, but also ways that we can, are there any innovative software systems, any kind of initiatives that we can undertake that can help these counselors who are helping so many of our students on our campuses. We are revamping our efforts to work with military student coordinators because we know that that is a very important population or subpopulation of our adult learners. And so we're looking at ways to help that group of students, and not just that group of students, but the coordinators who work with them. How can they learn from one another, and how can we innovate as a state? We are meeting with faculty. Dr. Thompson has a faculty advisory network, and in between his meetings with them, I follow up with the faculty and get ideas from them. We have a much deeper sense and a much better sense of what is going on in the classrooms and on our campuses now than we ever have in the past, and it's just phenomenal. Dr. Thompson also has a student advisory group, and we know that the student voice is incredibly important. Another thing that is not on this slide, but I do want to mention briefly because it was mentioned in the presentation by the University of Pikeville, but Kentucky Virtual Library is looking into ways that we can possibly promote open education resources on our public campuses. That would be a fabulous affordability structure for Kentucky, but it is, librarians on the campuses are typically the ones who handle this, and we have a fantastic asset in the virtual library. So in addition to convening all of these groups and following up in between, we are doing a series of professional development for each one of them. We're identifying speakers that we can bring in and share this resource with all of our campuses at once. So in addition to all of these meetings, I did want to point out one other thing that's on this slide, and that's the new electronic transfer system. So we have had an online portal for many years, but it needed some updating. And what we are doing now is just, it's the next generation, and it's a phenomenal resource that we can share with not only advisors on the campuses, but students. It is a student-facing portal. Not only does it have kind of a centralized record of all the degree requirements associated with every single program in the state, we have degree pathways between KCTCS and each one of these programs. There is also a mechanism by which students and parents can explore career opportunities that are associated with each and every one of these programs. And it also serves as a repository of credit equivalencies for every gen ed course at every public university. So it's a massive database that shows how every course equates to every other course at our universities and at KCTCS. So this site's already up and running, but we haven't really promoted it fully yet because we do want to make a few additional changes. But I just wanted to give you just a couple of examples of what we are doing that is both helping the campuses and the professionals we work with at the campuses, but also that CPE does have an end with students, and that we do have student-facing activities, and we know how incredibly important that is to interact with students, because student success is all about them. And so I'm open to any questions you would have, and if not, I will turn it over to, I guess, Dr. Thompson or Dr. Ellis.
Hey, Heather, go to the next slide, please. Let me set this up quickly, and Ron Bill, if you're still online, I can't see you, but Ron told me after my listening tour, when I was reporting out about the things I've heard, and Ron said, well, the big point now is, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to follow up? Let them know. Well, indeed, there's several things I will tell you. And Ron, I've got a whole list of things I heard and what we've done. I'm happy to send those to you. I won't go over all those things now, but I thought that was really, that was exactly the right thing, in my opinion, that a board member would say, to be honest with you. And so what we heard a lot on the listening tour from everybody, college students, high school students, faculty from both sides, everywhere, that we have really a P20 issue. We have transition issues. We have issues that are not connecting from learning to really moving from one place to the next, from communication and so on. To make a long story short, as you all know, I've kept you in the loop for the last 2 years since I've been in this job. I've kind of shaped CPE, our office, in a way that focuses on our priorities. The kind of silos we used to have, we really don't have, and I'm happy to fill you in on all those if you're interested. But what we've done is that we've taken what resources we have, human resources. We haven't filled positions. We moved positions around to focus on those big 4 areas. The area where we really were lacking is truly filling out that P20 piece. And the other area we're working on is obviously the workforce, college to workforce. And so what we were able to do is to truly capture Amanda Ellis. And you all know Amanda. She was Dr. Amanda Ellis, second in command at KDE a long time. And even though she's young, she's got a lot of years in this P20 world. And we were able to convince her to come over to CPE and lead this. We know that we're going to have to do a much better job at a complete level, whether it's dual credit, whether it's getting people to know the value of college, we keep having this drop in college going. Last year was 53 point something, now it's 51.7. So there's a lot we have to do. I'm on the Kentucky Board of Education. I have informed them that we are working on this P20 plan, and it's an in-depth plan with a lot of parts, and they're excited about being our partners. My hope was to have gotten a lot of this plan to you before this meeting. If we were going to have a retreat, we would be getting into it much deeper, to whereby we could get some movement on you all are proving it or saying you like it or didn't like it or changing it, where we would have been able to, at the KBE's first meeting, is to have the board chair of each of the respective agencies, along with the presidents, in my case, president, commissioner, and KBE, to really sit down and sign this P20 pact, that we were going to be working together with our resources and our efforts to really do what needs to be done. This has been a big problem in Kentucky. And it's transitions at every level, whether we're talking about K through 3, whether we're talking about middle school to high school or elementary to middle school, high school to college, and so on. And so we've had gear up some other items that have been able to help us to do some of this, but we haven't had a complete P20 strategic process, nor a real working P20 board that would allow us to really do this. So I wanted to set that up, and happy to answer any questions before I turn it over and let you meet Amanda. Amanda, for those that don't know you, please just take about 30 seconds or less to tell them who you are. But before you do, I just want to be able to answer any questions that the board would have of me right now. And I'll come back in and interact with Amanda on this, but I wanted to hear any responses that you may have before we jump into this. Well, here and now, Amanda, I'm going to let you jump in, introduce yourself, and start going over some of these things.
Thank you so much, President Thompson, and thank you, board, for having me. Like Aaron said, I'm Amanda Ellis. This is my 24th year in education, all of it spent in a K-12 setting or at KDE, and this is my first deep dive into post-secondary with the privilege of being able to be that connector. And so I worked at the Department of Education as a deputy commissioner and the chief academic officer for 6.5 years. And then before that, I was an elementary principal, a middle school teacher, and a curriculum coach. My husband's also a teacher. So we're very much invested in the P12 system and really see opportunities, as Dr. Thompson said, of really connecting dots. And so my goal in this role, and I'll just briefly talk about it, is exactly what he says, is to improve successful transitions for students. Really, if we have the opportunity with your blessing and the support of the Kentucky Board of Education to move forward with the P20 Council, it could be a powerful collaboration to really look at transitions for the entire educational journey for our students from the time they enter preschool all the way until they enter the workforce, and being very intentional and strategic around that. Really, in order to be prepared to go to college and to be prepared for each level of your educational journey, you have to have high quality, well-trained, and honestly, culturally competent teachers. And so one of our focus is on pre-service teachers, so that education preparation programs, diversifying our workforce, and really ensuring that they are well equipped. And that it goes on with the professional learning. And so that is obviously in great partnership with our universities, our ed prep providers, and the Department of Education and the Educational Professional Standards Board. And then the third area that we will be bringing to you and keeping you informed on overall is really on access to and awareness of the opportunities that are out there for students. And a lot of this has already been discussed today around the Work Ready Scholarship, dual credit scholarship, the opportunities and the benefits of taking advantage of post-secondary opportunities in high school, and really preparing for post-secondary opportunities, whether that's a 2-year, 4-year, whichever of the pathways that students choose, that they're well advised, that the parents are fully informed, and they actually have access to those opportunities, understanding how funding works. A lot of this was already talked about today, and that takes intentional strategic communication and collaboration. So I've been on board for just right at 2 months, and have had lots and lots of meetings to start connecting dots. And we've already began that work. And so I won't take up time. I know we're very close, but I will tell you that I am committed to equitable access for our students and improving the transitions. I want to see a skilled workforce for Kentucky, and part of that is ensuring that their journey from beginning all the way to the end is of high quality and accessible. And there's even an awareness of what we offer in Kentucky. So I'll be working with that. I look forward to working with you and receiving feedback. We're engaging with our stakeholders daily, and we'll definitely be in contact to give a more robust strategic plan, as Dr. Thompson mentioned, with specific actions that we want to take to move forward with these plans, and with what Dr. Thompson has heard in his listening tour about really what needs to happen for transition, for advising, for opportunities and access. And so I look forward to being a major player in that work. So thank you very much, Dr. Thompson. I'll turn it to you and see if there's.
Thank you, Amanda. And if Cheryl is on the line, Cheryl, I know you are clapping your hands now. I don't see you, but I know you are. You've been talking about this for a while. I just want to finish up this quickly, just to let you know a few things. As you all know, 60 by 30 has been our guiding principle, our North Star to get where we need to go. But we're not going to get there without having more adult learners engaged with us. This is a huge transition area that KCTCS and the rest of our transition areas need to be a part of. So working with employers and so on is exactly what we're going to be doing, as Lee can fill you in on. It's what we're doing with our partner KCTCS that we brought on. But there's a lot of other pieces that we're doing, and I'm going to let them have this piece here. The thing that I feel really good about is that this academic program review piece that we will have things directly connected with employment. We'll also have it with the way we're doing our curricular complexity items. So there's a lot of pieces that we do have in place that we've been working on for a while that should be all in full operational order by the first of the year. So we're happy to answer any questions that you may have. If not, I'm going to let Lee, you take it from this point forward.
Well, I don't see any questions, and I know our time is very compressed. And as I mentioned at the top of this presentation, this is really just an opportunity to get a high-level overview of what the agency has been focused on and the direction that we want to go, with the idea that we would have a much more extended and in-depth conversation in a retreat format, which we clearly want to do and need to do. So what we will do is we will do a hard stop on this presentation by in about 10 minutes. That'll give Chair Brandstetter an opportunity to make some wrap-up comments. So staff, we need to stop there. I'm going to sort of give you a heads up now that who's ever got the wheel at about 5:12, if you could wrap things up and let Ben finish up. But I did want to touch on another key area of our work and one of our 4 key policy areas, which is in workforce and education alignment. We've talked about this issue time and time again just today, and how important it is, and how to make sure that our academic programs are well aligned with what our workforce needs. CPE has really embraced this issue pretty deeply. I am very happy to introduce Dr. Shannon Gilkey, who will be working with CPE on many of these workforce and economic development issues. Shannon got his start in state higher education policy work at CPE a number of years ago. He then went on to help found a national nonprofit higher education policy and consulting organization, where he worked in a number of states around the country on educational attainment and workforce issues. So KCTCS was smart enough to recruit him a couple of years ago back to Kentucky, and he leads the system's workforce development arm. And we were able to work out an arrangement with KCTCS to allow us to share Shannon on a part-time basis to help develop a comprehensive education to work agenda for post-secondary education. So he's going to help us align KCTCS and university strategies, connect with other state and national partners, and leverage the power of higher education to help support local business. So Shannon, if you could just take 2 or 3 minutes and introduce yourself and talk about your sort of very quickly your vision, that would be great.
Sure. Well, thanks, Lee. And I just started my stopwatch here to keep it short. Thanks, everyone. Great to be here and really excited to come back home. Grew up in Hopkins County, lived in Jefferson County, Callaway County, and now I'm in Woodford County. So love Kentucky and started in the West and happy to be back home again. I'll tell you, working with the last 5 years before I came back about 1.5 years ago to Kentucky, I worked with governors, Republican and Democrat, around the country. And you know, this higher education being the center of gravity for really the value proposition that we see facing our economic development and our workforce, which is 99% of the jobs after the post-secondary recession of 2008 required some form of post-secondary credential. That's by way of the Georgetown Center for Education and the Workforce. Both the governors, both Republican and Democrat, that I had the pleasure to work with on their higher education attainment plans said higher education is the answer for economic development and global competitiveness. And it's not just a talking point. If you look at the statistic Dr. Thompson said about our dislocated workers right now because of COVID, the vast majority of them don't have some form of post-secondary training. And so I think the way to move forward is to really aggressively attack that value proposition in 2 main ways. Number one, making it very easy for an individual to show up and day one prepared for that occupation out of our KCTCS colleges or our 4-year institutions. And then the second one is to make sure that there is a method of delivering higher education. I know that came up by someone earlier on in the conversation, that allows an individual to come up to and through higher education, getting that work-based learning experience, that knowledge, those technical skill sets, so that they see a real value in the price tag that they're paying, whether that's mom and dad helping them pay it, taking a student loan out, or really using all of their federal or state higher education. So it's easy to say in 2 or 3 sentences. It's very complex to do. I know we have an attainment goal here in Kentucky, and Kentucky is one of the first in the country to set an attainment agenda back in the late 90s. So Kentucky's been a leader for decades in this work, but it really is that next step of innovation, is aligning that education to work agenda. And it not only has workforce implications and equity implications, but it's also economic development implications, because economic developers are getting more and more questions about the talent pipeline a state produces as the key driver for recruiting an industry or a business into a state or a location, much more than tax incentives or any other big drivers in economic development or investment, state investment. It's that talent pipeline. And if Kentucky wants to compete globally, which is where we need to compete, not just with our sister states and brother states around our region or even our national states, then that talent pipeline and really aligning it between education and work is the space to drive. And I'm just so thankful that the council, in the conversation I've seen today and in the documents I've had a pleasure to read in the last 2 or 3 weeks since coming on board in this limited capacity, that the council's vision for that is ready to really put some action steps in place. I'm happy to be a part of the team. 3 minutes and 20 seconds.
Thank you, Shannon. I appreciate that. And members of the board, I look forward to connecting you again with Shannon. He's going to be instrumental in helping us think about, I think, a very robust and aggressive agenda in this area. Quickly, let me turn it over to Bill Payne, who's going to talk a little bit about the third priority area, which is college affordability.
Heather, would you go to the next slide? Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. In this slide, I want to talk for just a few minutes about some of the efforts that the council is engaged in to ensure that college remains affordable for Kentucky citizens. I think most of our council members know that in the current academic year, the council approved the lowest tuition and fee increases in over 20 years. Many of our post-secondary institutions did not raise tuition this year for resident undergraduate students. The system average increase was actually 0.7%. And just so you know, the previous academic year, the system average increase was 2.2%, which was also the lowest tuition increase in the previous 2 decades. So in the 2 years that President Thompson has been our president, we've had 2 years in a row where the tuition and fee increases have been the lowest in over 2 decades. But I really want to commend our institutions for recognizing that students and families were struggling during this difficult time with the pandemic. Some may have lost their jobs. And, you know, the institutions really came to the table and did what they needed to do to keep tuition and fee increases to a minimum. Another thing that CPE has been doing is spearheading efforts to get students to fill out the FAFSA. Obviously, this is a very important issue. If students don't complete the FAFSA form, they won't know what their true net price of college would have been. And so they don't know that college is more affordable than just that sticker price. Another thing that we did in the current year, CPE redirected $440,000 of the agency's strategic initiative funds to the institutions to help them respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. And these funds are being used by the institutions to pursue distance learning equipment, provide professional development related to distance learning, purchase personal protective equipment, and support other COVID-19 related expenses. Finally, as you can see in that last bullet, we really need to focus on renewing our efforts to secure state support for post-secondary education, or at least at a minimum, try to minimize any potential funding cuts in the coming fiscal year. As most of you know, during the early stages of developing the 2022 state budget, it really looked like that post-secondary education finally might receive some new funding to support campus operations, to support asset preservation projects, and other expenses on campus. But after the pandemic hit, those aspirations, of course, went by the wayside. But we do have another opportunity to advocate for funding this coming January when the General Assembly convenes in short session, because they will be making decisions and engaging in budget deliberations to determine funding levels for 2021-22. So we do want to continue to advocate for higher education in this coming short session of the General Assembly. Does anybody have any questions about some of these key activities that the council is engaged in to keep college affordable?
I have a question real quick, if you don't mind.
Sure thing.
My question is, I know that it's working with some students, when COVID began to happen, a lot of them suffered very economically. Has that increased people's propensity to fill out the FAFSA and to explore these financial aid options, or is it kind of staying the same?
You know, that's an excellent question. There's two answers to that question. One is, what we saw is that in the beginning, it had an effect. People were not filling them out because many of the P12 folk, you know, they were working with them to fill them out. And in March, when they went to digital learning, then it literally stopped. I mean, it stopped. And the people that it affected the most were those that needed it the most. Now, we had Kentucky has always been known to be a high FAFSA fill out state, but many know that I felt like it wasn't even close to being even enough for our state. So the second part of that answer, and CPE should be really proud of this. I know I am. CPE led a charge with a variety of other folks, Kia, Pritchard, and a lot of effort to put a big push on getting people to fill out FAFSAs. We did it through the digital media. We did it through snail mail. Our Gear Up folks actually called people, send them little cards in the mail. And we think this is one of the major contributors to Kentucky not looking as bad in enrollment as we originally thought we would. So we know that taking a playbook out of taking a statement out of Christy's playbook, we know we need to start doing this as a way. Who would ever thought that sending cards through snail mail would be listed as innovation? But we found out for these folks that they were. But we've got to double down on this even earlier than we've ever done. But that's what we know about the FAFSA fill out. We think it will have equally the same effect. We know that whatever we're talking about now, it's not for just this semester. We know we're talking about for a full year. So we're going to employ this kind of set of tactics again, Colby.
All right. Thanks, President Thompson. And staff and all that participated in this work plan report, I appreciate all your efforts. I do need to kind of cut off the discussion right now. I told everybody we'd be out of here by 5:15, and we're going to hit that, but we'll probably pick up some content at our November meeting. Hopefully that'll be in person, but time will tell on that one. The reason I wanted to stop a couple of minutes before 5:15 is just to give it a couple updates ahead of tomorrow morning's business meeting. First of all, just a friendly reminder of the business meeting tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Same setup for us. And so just, I guess, go ahead and get dressed if that's what your normal work at home routine is, or show up in your pajamas if that's what your normal work at home routine is. We won't judge you either way. I did want to let everybody know that it looks like the governor did appoint 3 new board members for the council. They may be joining us at our meeting tomorrow. They may not. So time will tell. We'll let everybody know. So you may see a few new faces. Unfortunately, that means a familiar face is no longer going to be able to join us in an official capacity. And she's in the top right of my screen and listed under Cheryl's iPad. She's got her sunglasses on. She's so cool. And she may not remember she had them on. But unfortunately, this is going to be Cheryl's last meeting. Cheryl, how long have you been on the council? Is it 10 years? 11? You're muted, so.
It's 10 years.
10 years, okay. I got it on the first try. But Cheryl's been a mainstay, and I've enjoyed developing a good relationship with her and getting to know Cheryl. I'm sure everybody else has as well. I'm not going to let this be her last meeting to join us. So once we do get back in person, we're going to demand that she attends our next meeting so we can give her a proper send off. So, but if you, in the meantime, if you feel so desired, give her a call, shoot her a text, send her an email. We have all kinds of ways to communicate in today's world. So no excuses on that. So, Cheryl, do you want to, I'm going to put you on the spot. Is there anything that you would like to say tonight? And then we'll do a proper one in the next few months.
I just want to say thank you for the amazing opportunity that I've had for these past 10 years to be part of CPE. I have learned an amazing amount of information about our state colleges, universities, and private and public, all the way across the line, K-12 and on. And it's been an amazing ride. And I know you've got your work cut out for you, but I feel like this council is so much more progressive and much more in tune with what is going on than it's ever been since I've been on council. And I'm really excited for the leadership that is before you and for the people that are on the board. And I couldn't say enough nice things about the colleagues I've had during this ride. So I will miss you all terribly. It's been a big part of my life. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you.
All right. Well, unless there's anything else, I will adjourn the meeting, the workshop meeting, until we have our business meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. Look forward to seeing everybody there. Thank you.